Hello everyone. I'm here for my daily sharing. Yeah, I think you can see me good there. So we're coming up to a Libra new moon. And that means that the sun and the moon are conjunct or in close proximity at the same degree in the sky in Libra this time around. So it's going to be the sun and moon are at 13 plus degrees of Libra, and Mars is going to be at 13 degrees as well. So it's going to be conjunct the new moon. Really interesting. This is on October 6th. And also we have the asteroid Lucifer, which is going to be at 14 degrees of Libra. So this is quite interesting because really Mars is in its opposite sign, Libra. And you know, Mars is our instinct. It's our instinctual nature to act on our own behalf and act upon our own desires and evolutionary desires, because Mars rules Aries, but it also rules Scorpio. It's the ancient ruler to Scorpio, and Pluto is the modern day ruler of Scorpio. So it does have a dual rulership, or I like to call the rulers guides. So Mars guides Scorpio and guides Aries. So our Aries instinctual nature to act on our own behalf of our own evolutionary path and the evolution of our soul. So we make our evolution conscious by our instincts and our instinctual nature. So Mars is going to be conjunct the new moon. This is interesting. Mars doesn't typically like to be in Libra because Libra is where our consciousness is really focused on the psychology of hearing the needs of others, right? And also, you know, acting on our own behalf in regards to relating, and which is really based on acting upon our own personal devotions to our own evolutionary path and our own values, right? So Mars is a little bit, you know, where Mars is our instinctual nature. When it's in Libra, it can actually be not as, I want to say, powerful in a way, because you know, the Libra archetype can you know, it's the archetype of the scales. So it's really looking to balance things out and to consider more than just oneself, right? But consider the outer world as well, and the needs of the outer world, and really hearing what the needs of the outer world really are. So it's not just about ourselves and our own evolutionary path, it's about the outside world and the evolutionary path of others, right? And Mars here can feel a little bit, there can be this indecisive nature, right? Because Libra is trying to balance both sides, right? And sometimes it does experience the extremes in order to really reflect on one's own needs as it relates to another's needs. So that's just a little bit about this coming new moon. And right there is a lot of information, really, because if you don't know, Lucifer is actually related to Venus, and we know that Libra is a Venus-ruled sign. So Lucifer is actually, its name means morning star. So Venus is a morning star and the bearer of light. And so when it's transiting through the sky, and when it where it is in our natal chart actually shows where it is that we can become the bearer of light, but it will show our weakest link. So our weakest emotional link when it comes to being the bearer of light. So it's really interesting that it's actually conjunct the new moon and Mars. So I think this could really expose in this coming cycle, of the new moon in Libra, which ultimately this cycle lasts until the full moon of Libra, which is on April 16th in 2022. So this can really be the seeds that we're sowing now at this new moon and in this new moon time period can really be growing and fruitioning all the way until that full moon in Libra on April 16th of 2022. And I've been looking at that chart. That's quite an interesting chart at that full moon. And I'll, share more about that another time. But it's, really recognizing with this Mars nature and our own instincts, there's likely to be some emotional instincts coming with Mars conjunct the moon like that, and the sun and Lucifer. So really paying attention to what is compelling us to act, because Mars is about action and how we take action. So what is the emotion that we're actually moving from? Because it's the emotion that we're moving from that actually fuels that which we're seeding. So remembering that our emotions are feeding. It's an energy that actually feeds that which we want to create, meaning this is what actually propels movement out in the world. So it's a really interesting placement in this new moon. I'm really excited to write about it. I'm going to write about it and actually explore it more in some other lives. But today I was thinking, as we're moving to this new moon, I would love to do a Carolyn Mace card read for individual and collective contemplation as we move to this new moon. What could be beneficial to everyone in contemplating and prepping for seeding our desires and what we desire to create on the earth plane, right? So this card's really just meant to be a point of focus, a point of meditation. See where it takes you. See how whatever card that comes up, how does that speak to you individually, but then also to us collectively and what we see in the collective, right? Whatever's going on right now. So I'm just going to shuffle a couple more times and then I'll pick a card for us. The card that comes up is Slave. Slave. So, of course, it's already got my wheels turning. So, the light attribute Carolyn Mace says is surrendering your power of choice to the divine with complete trust. The shadow attribute, giving your willpower to an external authority out of fear of making your own choices. So here's the card again. I'm actually going to read the book because she does go into a little bit more detail, and then we'll talk about it. Slave. Puppet. That's an interesting one. Puppet. Just show. surrenders to the divine, a higher power, or a trusted spiritual master to become truly free. Shadow slave lacks the power of choice and self-authority and follows orders that violate one's integrity. This is so right on with Libra. Do you have a history of becoming a slave to the system? Or is slavery part of your genetic history? Oh my God. This is so powerful. So, gosh, so much. Where to begin, really? So actually I want to leave my glasses on because I want to refer to this. So the light attribute, surrendering your power of choice to the divine with complete trust. So really this is thy will, divine will, right? So it's ultimately, really having this direct connection to source or God Goddess, however you name that. And, really that the bottom line of our own contribution to our own evolutionary path and the evolutionary path is really surrender to what is the divine expression, what is divine. And recognizing that, we can trust that ultimately, as we're really connected to the divine ourselves, we trust that the evolution of the collective consciousness is in alignment with the divine. I'm going to move. I will go back to that, but that's my first inclination. If anyone is on, I can't tell, but if anyone's on or hops on or is watching the replay, please let me know what you think. I would love to know. So, shadow attribute, giving your willpower to an external authority out of fear of making your own choices. So this fear can be really lack of self-responsibility. So you would just rather someone else make the choice for you. And this is the thing with Libras. Libra is very much about the energy of oneself and others. Libra in its in the light of its consciousness is really about generating mutual benefits, and it's in generating energy. So the regeneration of energy moving energy where it circulates between oneself and another. Whoever that other is, the other could be anything in the outside world. It could be a situation. It could be a person. It could be the earth itself, nature. It could be anything, right? So is this something that actually is nurturing to the inner world and the outer world, which actually circulates energy? But when we actually relinquish our own choice to another authority outside of ourselves, then we are really coming from a place of disempowerment as well as a place of lacking self-responsibility. So we would rather give our choices over to another whom we see as an authority so that we do not have to be self-responsible. This is so much the Libra archetype, and where Libra can actually degenerate energy, where it actually creates imbalances and lopsided energy rather than balanced energy. And we know that it actually, in order to have harmony, the requirement is that energy is balanced and that energy is mutually beneficial. So getting the slave card here with Libra is a really big deal. Hi there. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Dilip. Thanks so much for hopping on. So surrenders to the divine, a higher power, or a trusted spiritual master to become truly free. So this is really just surrendering to divine. I don't know if it just cut me off, but I'm going to say this again. Shadow slave lacks the power of choice and self-authority. So when we relinquish our own connection to the divine and our own devotion to our own personal connection to the divine and put authority outside of ourselves, then we are in this shadow slave energy. If we follow orders that violate our own integrity, this is shallow, and it's shadow, because this is where we become enslaved to others. So we give away our power of choice, and we actually become a slave to others' ideas of what the divine is, or others' connection to the divine, or we're feeding imbalance out in the world. We're feeding an imbalance in giving and taking. So this is the thing. Libra is about, its guide is Venus. It's ruled by Venus, right? So this is Yang form of Venus. The Yin form of Venus is Taurus, and its rulership of Taurus, or its guidance of Taurus energy. Okay, so with Libra, this is where we're giving and receiving. And so the idea for a circulation of consciousness in the wheel of consciousness, or the circulation of energy in the evolution and momentum of evolution of energy, is to actually be balanced in giving and receiving. But if we overgive, which can be a shadow piece, the shadow of Libra, when we overgive, it is coming from a place of lack, or the shadow of one's own self-love, a lack of self-love, self-value. And when we overgive, it's typically because there is a part of us that is needing to people please, and to actually coming from a place of lack rather than our own connection to source, knowing that the integrity of who we are is first and foremost committed to our own self-value and self-love. And this contributes to our own evolutionary path, and therefore the evolutionary path of the collective. And then as we come into Libra, we recognize that the balance of giving and receiving needs to be mutual and balanced, right? So that you don't have one person overgiving. And because consciousness always wants to balance itself out for homeostasis, when you have people that overgive, you have people that take. So typically what happens, and what we tend to feed if we're overgiving, is we actually enable takers, which, what does that do? It weakens their Mars energy. Why do I say that? Because Libra in the wheel of consciousness, or the zodiac, opposes Aries, ruled by Mars, guided by Mars. So if we overgive in relationship, we are weakening the Mars of another person by enabling them to be a taker in our life. So when we give choice over to others, when it should be our choice, we are actually enabling to take from us. And we are actually enabling for another to weaken their Mars. It can also enable them to be acting out the shadow side of Mars. So with Libra, this is about learning balance. It's actually not inherently balanced. It's actually learning balance. So it can show and expose where it is that we relinquish our own values to another, to accommodate them, to appease them, to please them, to be liked by them, to be loved by them, to be accepted by them, to be invited to the party, to be invited. Not trusting that our own values are going to have us attract the right people at the right time, at the right place. Venus is all about attracting things to us. So with Libra, when we have been attracting relationships that are not mutually beneficial, it is an indicator and our cue to really look at where it is we're not acting on our own behalf for our own values, in our own self-love and self-value. And, are we trusting our connection to the divine, that the divine will provide so that we can actually be in relationships that are mutually beneficial, that actually gain momentum and consciousness for the evolution of not only the self, but all others. Because when we relinquish our choice, when we relinquish our own self-values and self-value, and just values in general, we are becoming enslaved to others. It creates and sets up codependent relationships, and Libra is very much about codependent relationships when it's imbalanced. But when it's balanced, it's interdependent relationships. Interdependent meaning that it's mutually beneficial. You don't have one person giving all the time and one person taking all the time. You have mutual energy exchange. And when you have mutual energy exchange, you cannot have a slave. There is no slavery. So this is the thing, is that, ultimately, this can be the experiences that may come up in this new moon energy, where we can really assess, am I in relationships that are mutually beneficial, where they're generating energy, they're not depleting energy for one person or the other. So this can really be a time of setting intention to eradicate or dissolve relationships that are not mutually beneficial, that actually create a slavery dynamic where we're actually giving or overgiving and one person is undergiving, right? Ultimately, with Pluto going through Capricorn, this is really exposing this dynamic in relationships. It exposes what relationships contribute to a depletion of energy, what relationships contribute to a mutual benefit, and also what kind of relating feeds slavery on the earth and in societies. If relationships are not mutually beneficial and there isn't an equal give and take, an equal giving and receiving, then it is a form of slavery. It is an energy of slavery. And so it makes total sense that this is the card that is picked for collective contemplation as we move into the new moon. Because the new moon can be a time of prayer through action around the kinds of relationships we want to attract in our world. So how we're acting, Mars, the seeds that we plant, which is a Mars energy, can really be having us receive through the Libra full moon in 6 months on April 16th, that Venusian energy will receive back that which we've planted, right? So Venus is very much connected to our energetic field. So I always think of it as the Taurus, Taurus. It is our energy field, and it's cultivated in Taurus vibration, Venus, right? Our own energetic vibration and our its connection to the unconscious and the evolutionary desires of our soul, our own evolutionary path. And so with the Mars energy, how we take action in the world is actually creating little energetic signatures. So there's signatures in our energy field that then we magnetize that energy back to us. Libra is the mirror. It is the reflection. So what is being reflected back to us in relationships? And if it is not mutually beneficial, this is our cue to go into our own Taurus energy and really self-reflect on what it is, what energy we're actually feeding within ourselves that is causing the imbalance in relationships or the things that we don't want in relationships. How are we attracting that to ourselves? Because ultimately, when we take responsibility for our own evolutionary path and our own choices, we recognize that everything that we attract in the outside world is a reflection of what we're valuing inside, internally. And so we have to really go into that inner side of Venus and reflect, what am I valuing? What is it? How am I vibrating? How are my choices attracting things into my life? And why is it congruent or not congruent? If it's not congruent, there are adjustments that need to be made so that then we can attract the quality of relationships and relating we desire and resonate with. Therefore, then there's no imbalance and there's no relinquishing of that responsibility to others, causing codependent relationships. And then when we are actually balanced in relating, balanced in relationships, balanced in giving and receiving in relationships, which also shows that there's a balance in our own masculine and feminine energy to get our needs met, then we can actually get to the next level in consciousness. But if that balance is not there, we cannot evolve. We have to have a solid, self-reliant structure of consciousness that actually, where we're regenerating energy and growing energy with others, within ourselves and with others, so that then we are actually ready to evolve, which then is the next archetype of Scorpio and its rulership, Pluto and Mars, right? So we cannot evolve in the outside world if we're codependent. We cannot evolve. We can only evolve so far if we're codependent. Because wherever there's imbalances, it actually halts the momentum of consciousness and the wheel of consciousness. If there's imbalance, you've got Libra and you got Aries, these are the spokes and of the wheel of consciousness, the zodiac. And if this is imbalanced, you can't move forward in the wheel, right? The wheel gets halted. So then you cannot evolve. And Scorpio is all about the evolutionary desires of each individual, the evolution, right? So we can't really evolve if we have imbalanced relationships, an imbalance of giving and receiving. It keeps throwing us back on the Virgo Pisces consciousness, which is, in its shadow, the master-slave complex. Because if we are not devoted to our own personal evolution and values and the divine, and we relinquish that when we come into contact with another, then we create and set up the shadow side of relating, which is then throws us back in on this master-slave complex. We become enslaved to others. But this is also why Libra can be the de facto god goddess, because this is where we can actually make others our god, or give our power of choice to others. So they become our god, basically, rather than, I know what my values are, I'm connected to God, I'm connected to the divine, and this is my piece of the divine that I am here to contribute to the collective. And in that, I'm providing a service. And I will stand in that service in growing light in the world, right? And actually the momentum of evolutionary consciousness with each other in the collective. So this is where slavery cannot be a part of that picture. We have to be actually seeing each other as equal, and really that in order for equality, we must have equal giving and receiving. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any thoughts, insights, questions, comments you'd like to share, I'd love to hear. It always makes the conversation more rich and more interesting. And as you know, I really believe we all have something to contribute to the conversation. So feel free to share any questions, comments, insights about this. And thanks so much for hopping on, whoever's hopped on. Thanks for watching the replay, if you're watching the replay. And as you know, I will be back tomorrow.